Right, another day of playing, and unfortunately the weather outside is really dark and dismal, so the lighting conditions aren't brilliant, so I apologise for that. Played one turn so far today and not much to report in that turn. This front company here of the Reds was forced to retire, and that was the only effect. I was expecting them to receive a lot more markers and so on, maybe even get routed. So they've got two machine guns firing at them now, one here and one there. These white volunteers are just out of rifle range of them at the moment. But then there was also the artillery firing, and all they got from all that fire was just to retire, so they were relatively unscathed, but they did fail to rally off any of those terror markers, so they are still vulnerable. Over here, the cavalry were forced to retire. They were badly shot up by this machine gun and from rifle fire from the checker in the building. So they now have 4 terror markers and were forced to retire, and the coloured infantry behind them managed to advance a little bit, and didn't take any fire because that was all directed at the cavalry. So they're actually leading the charge again at the moment. And on the other side of the table, another naval machine gunner taken off the board. He was about there, this time from artillery fire from the whites in the village. And these are the remains of the naval brigade trying to seek cover in the woods from this tank that is threatening them, but the tank's machine gun fire, even at that short range, totally ineffective this time. And the train is making quite good progress along the line, so it will soon be in a position where it will need to start slowing down to come to a halt about here. And no effect from the fire of this tank or this artillery piece here on the train. Both missed with their shots. Yeah, and that was it for that turn. So on to the next one. Well, as you can see, there are some fleeing Reds there. This attack in the middle has been decimated now. The front company were destroyed this time. They had a lot of terror markers on them, and this artillery fire finished them off, so I've taken them off the table. And then the second company behind them, which is that fleeing company there, they routed as a result of the machine gun fire. So I could have taken them off the table, but I've just left them there to demonstrate that they are running away, which leaves one company of Red Guard. So this is a bit kind of debatable now. If I were playing the black powder rules in their entirety, that centre brigade now is below half strength, so they wouldn't be able to continue the charge. So I think I'll apply that rule and say that from now on they have to start to retire. Yeah, so effectively that means that's the end of their game. They're going to start pulling back now, which makes sense. I mean, it was a pretty ambitious charge. So in the centre of the table, the whites have it at the moment. Over on this side, however, I would say the Reds have got the upper hand. They're occupying one building of the village. They're seriously damaging the White attack now. This front company has lost a platoon, actually taken off the table from machine gun fire. This hasn't happened in the game yet, but they've been pinned, which is a rule from Red Actions, not from Black Powder. So they have to pass a rally test to get rid of that pinned marker. I would say that's one thing that I think is sort of fairly vague with the Red Action rules. And if I show you this card here for a Red Guard company, you can see they've got four rally numbers there. One for charging, one for fear, which is when you want to rally off terror markers, one for serious, which effectively is when a serious event occurs, such as you take 2 terror markers with an asterisk as well on the shooting table, or presumably on the hand-to-hand as well, though we haven't had any hand-to-hand. And then you've got another value for rallying, which is when you want to do something like get rid of a pinned marker. And in this company's case, each value is different, and it kind of makes it possibly a little bit more complex. You know, why not just have one morale value that you apply to all the circumstances? So I don't know, I'll keep playing it up as it is, but it does make it difficult to remember sometimes. Oh, what number do I have to roll to get rid of that pin marker? Is it fear, or is it rally, or whatever? So that's what I was saying right at the beginning of these videos, that some of the rules are a little bit rough at the edges and you have to house rule. But it doesn't, you know, it doesn't matter. I think they've put so much work into flavouring the Red Action rules that I think they're a really impressive rule. And as I say, the biggest downfall of them was that when you're moving unit by unit, I go, you go, it takes forever. So this, amalgamating it with Black Powder, has really worked out well, and it's certainly how I'm going to play this game in future. Anyway, so over here the Reds have it, I would say. In the centre the Whites do, and on the left, or the Reds' left anyway, definitely the infantry, the naval contingent, have more or less given up, and they're fleeing into the woods to try and take cover, which has helped them. They're taking a lot less damage from the artillery fire, and even this machine gun on this tank failed to hit them. Unfortunately, the officer has been shot and replaced by another one because they failed their orders and rolled a 6. So there's a new commissar in charge of them. So not looking good for the naval part over here, but this train really could, if it can finally reach its destination and get to about here, it would really mash up all these troops here. So I think the game really is going to hinge on whether this armoured train survives or not. So we'll see. But I would imagine I'll finish the game today. Well, as you can see, the train has moved quite a long way down the track, and this is another advantage of using Black Powder to an extent. When the train's up to full speed in Red Actions, using inches, it has a maximum move distance of 8 inches. I'm using centimetres, which means it's only moving at top speed 8 centimetres per turn down the track, and that's another element of how, when you think all these infantry would only be moving 5 inches or 5 centimetres per turn, does take a long time for the game to progress. When you add in this the black powder element, that the officer, so the officer here, makes a command move for the train to move forward along the track. If he gets 3 below his command value, which he did in this case, it means you can take 3 turns. So in fact, I've been able to move the train 24 centimetres in this turn. And I don't think that's unreasonable, really, in terms of keeping the game flowing and so on. I mean, I know a lot of people criticise black powder for the fact that it seems to be very disjointed, in that some units don't move at all and others take 3 goes in 1 turn and so on. But that's one of the elements of black powder that I really enjoy. It makes the game less predictable in a way, but also not more erratic, but more sort of reflecting the way things can change suddenly on the battlefield, if that makes sense. So anyway, I'm going to have to start ordering the train to slow down now, because pretty soon it will be in a position to open fire on those troops in the village, and that could turn the balance of the game. Over here, the Red Guard failed to receive an order from the officer to retire, but then were chewed up by the artillery again and got 2 forced retires out of it. So the artillery persuaded them where the officer couldn't. So they are now out of range of the machine gun fire. So I'm just going to sort of slowly start taking them back now, and they'll be out of the game. The naval brigade are still sheltering in the woods, which is helping that they're not taking hits from the artillery any longer. and the tank has given up trying to shoot at them, and is now using its marauder ability that I decided to give it. Is off to the other side of the battlefield to see if it can attack these Reds in the rear, because the frontal assault has faltered. They haven't managed to rally off the pin or the terror tokens, for the cavalry, so that charge has got nowhere in this last turn. Right, we're about 3 turns on now, and how the situation has developed is that the train is now at a halt in the perfect spot for its rear car to open fire on the flank of the White Army, and this flaming mass here I've just put on the table to replace the white tank that was there. That was destroyed almost immediately, and this company here is taking a lot of terror markers from not only artillery from this gun, but there are 2 machine guns as well firing on it. It's lost a platoon. It's got 3 terror tokens, so 1 more and it'll be off the table. But in return, the only solution to the problem of the train now for the Whites is to bring their artillery to bear on it. So these 2 artillery pieces were out of sight of the train behind this building, so they're now prolonging backwards and attempting to turn in order to be able to fire at point blank range and return back at the train. And in the meantime, both of these 2 guns here had an arc of fire on the train. One of them has scored a direct hit on the engine, which will reduce the train's speed if it does start to move again, but also will incapacitate the train completely. It won't be able to move at all if it takes 3 hits. Every time you get a direct hit on the engine, the engine crew have to take a morale test and they passed in this case. But if they would have failed that morale test, then they would start the train up and try and reverse it out of range of the guns. And of course, if they did that, then the train would be moving and the guns wouldn't be able to fire. So the game really, it does hinge on this train now and what damage it can do. So if it begins to move backwards, I think I will call it a white victory. But if not, we'll just let the game develop and see how that goes on. And over here, the army commander is desperately trying to get back to these two guns here and give them a command to turn and bring some more increased artillery fire to bear on the train as well. So it's all happening over there. And on this side, the Reds' fire on these troops has turned ineffective again, and the front company has managed to rally off both the pin marker it had and the terror tokens, and those three companies have advanced a small distance. And the Reds have also brought up another machine gun company. It was there, not doing anything, didn't have a field of fire. So they've brought that up to the edge of the field now, and that's laying on some machine gun fire on these troops as well, but to this point without effect. So yeah, it's turned into a really, well, I've been enjoying this game throughout really, but it really feels to me like there are kind of realistic things happening. None of the things that have happened seem too far-fetched. I mean, the ranges do look a little bit odd. You know, for a sort of the massive guns that this train has on the carriages. I mean, that is would just blow away whatever it was in, you know, at the other end of its muzzle, as it were. But you have to make allowances for ranges and scales and things when you're playing war games. I mean, that 12 figures per company, you know, that's one example of how you have to kind of allow your imagination to go with it, really. So yeah, anyway, I'll keep you up to date in a minute. Well, it's in the balance. The two Russian artillery pieces, one was destroyed by fire from the armoured train, the machine guns and the cannon, and the company of white volunteers that were here were eliminated as well, but the other artillery pieces managed to turn and fire on the train, and it did score a direct hit. So if you remember, each car can take up to 3 direct hits before it's eliminated, so still got 2 lives, as it were. Over here, none of the artillery, another piece there and there, and these 2 which have managed to turn now, the colonel managed to get them to turn around and direct their fire at the train. None of those scored any hits, so no need to roll for the morale of the train crew. So a little bit kind of on the balance there. A lot of the other infantry, though, that was standing around doing nothing, the whites have now got them, another group there as well, have got them to kind of cross the field and see if they can do anything about these Reds here that are still holding up this charge. They're really struggling to get over this rough field here, moving really slowly. And then of course what's probably going to do for them is this tank, which is making good progress across the table. Will soon be, well, probably will be able to fire on them in the next turn. And they've got nothing, they've got no answer to the tank at all. They've got no weaponry that can knock it out now. So that's probably going to end the Reds' chances of a victory, because it means if they're eliminated over here, then the Whites have won 2 of the 3 kind of areas of the table really, and then the other one is sort of in the balance at the moment. But anyway, we'll carry on, see how it goes. Right, I'm going to call it an end of the game here. Played a few more turns and just describe how it turned out. It's basically a white victory. Over this side it turned into an artillery duel between all the white artillery pieces, and they did have more at the start of the game, so that was always going to sway the balance. So it turned into an artillery duel between the train's guns and all this white artillery. And as you can see, everything here has been swept away, all the gun crews killed and so on there. And there was an artillery piece here where the crew were forced to retire and leave their gun. They can always be rallied back if it were to come to that. But there's still a surviving gun there, and those 2, and one of them managed to get a second direct hit on the engine compartment. It can still take 1 more direct hit before it's destroyed, and there's still 2 direct hits before that car there stops firing. But what happened was that whenever the engine takes a direct hit, it's obliged to take a morale test for the compartment crew, and it failed. So they've started the engine up again, and it's now in reverse, going back up the line. And of course, the minute that happens, the guns can no longer fire in these rules. So effectively, all of the Russian artillery is now silenced, and you could always play, you know, the officer trying to rally the engine crew and get them to change their minds and head back towards the game. But I think enough is enough, and well, because that could just seesaw, and all the time they're going to be taking more artillery fire. And over here, I mean, as you already seen in the centre, the Reds got pushed back. Over here, this white charge is really slow, but they are progressing forwards, and the red contingent here are kind of beleaguered on 3 sides now. They've got the frontal assault, but coming into play soon will be all these white infantry here, plus the tank, which they don't have an answer for. So it's just a matter of time before these are swept away, and that would be 2 segments of even ignoring the train and what's going on over there, that would be 2/3 of the table in the white control. So it's time to recognise a red defeat and call it a day. So I hope you've enjoyed watching that. I've certainly enjoyed playing it. Just before I end the video, I just want to have one more little say about red action rules. So I'm just going to halt the video temporarily and just show you a little bit more about those. Right, well, it's really just again to express my admiration for these rules. You can download them from a website called The Perfect Captain. They've got a whole range of rules for different periods and areas. To my mind, these rules are better than anything I've ever come across commercially. and there aren't that many rules that are specific to the Russian Civil War anyway. But when you try and use more generic rules and apply them to this period, they never really feel as though they work for me. Whereas these rules are specific to the period, and they've done so much work on them. So what you'd be able to download is the rule book itself, which is it's well written and covers lots of different aspects of the rules, but you can also download this QRF, and if you remember, I think I said right at the beginning that the rules, I mean, they're free, so come on, you can't expect perfection for a free set of rules, but they are a little bit rough at the edges. And one thing in particular is that I have found every time I play is that the rule book and the QRF are worded slightly differently, and sometimes you can get one impression from the QRF and the other only on some very kind of minor details, and it's easily ironed out and house ruled. But the big issue that I have had playing these rules in the past is that the game just goes really slowly, because you're having to alternate moves between players when you've got more than about 10 units on the table, and I had far more than that in this game. It just really slows down, and I much prefer games where a player moves all his forces and then hands over, and then has a shooting phase like in Black Powder, and then hands over to the opponent, and then they move their pieces, have a shooting phase, and then the melee phase, which we never got into in this game, but the melee phase is simultaneous, and you play it that way. And also Black Powder has the advantage of really accelerating the game, because units can move, if they get a good enough dice roll, they can move 3 turns in one go, and it really does make the game go a lot faster and more fluidly. So the combination of the two, really great. I think it really worked out well, and I've really enjoyed this game, and I'm certainly going to adopt this method in the future. And yet another period now that I've got to, I feel inclined to paint more figures for. It's just non-stop. But just to show you as well the amount of work that the Perfect Captain has put in to this this rule set. I was using my own skull tokens as terror tokens, but you can print off terror tokens. You can print off, never happened, but you can take prisoners. So there's captives, pin markers. You saw one example of that. Can't remember what H is. I think it's got something to do with horror. I think it stands for horror, but that didn't crop up in the rules when we were playing them today. So there's lots of tokens that you can print off. Then you've got the chits, the individual chits for your officers, and I didn't need too many of them today, because I only gave one to the officer stands and not one to each company. But this is just for the White Army and the Red Army. In these rules there are interventionist forces, so you've got the armies of America, of France, of Britain, of Japan. You've got the Greens, you've got the anarchists. So they have got character. They've got Turks, Ottoman Turks, all kinds. So you can fight sort of back beyond scenarios. You can fight Russian Civil War, and they've all got whole compendium of different officers and characters and so on. So they've done all that work as well. Then they've got so many different units. I mean, you saw the cards, such as I was playing the Red Guards and the Red all the troop types that I had in the game. But this is just a small example of things that I didn't use. I mean, I had another armoured train because I have got a white train. Red conscripts, red mortar, red army cavalry, chankers, haven't got a chanker painted up yet, red Latvians, red Cossacks, that's just for the Bolsheviks. You've got white officer company, plastoons, the Czech Legion, white mortar detachment, Cossack squadron, different types of armoured car. There's a armoured Garford Putilov. What was I using? I was using an Austin Putilov. More field guns, Ford machine gun cars, Renault tank. I've got a few of those. Peter Pig do nice models for in their World War One range of some French Renault tanks, and they were supplied to the Whites. I've got some unpainted models. Must get round to painting someday. Heavier artillery, 105mm artillery. Another machine gun detachment. The Whippet tank is another one, if you can get the model. A heavier mortar, a generic chanker, another armoured car. Central Asian cavalry, more plastoon. Caucasian recruits. I think that might be for the Turks. Looks a bit Turkish, I don't know. National regulars, national conscripts, Polish legionnaire infantry, prisoner of war infantry, because the lot of prisoners of war, like the Czech Legion, were trying to they were freed and they took part in the war. Polish regulars, Polish conscripts. So you could build up a whole entire Polish army here. Polish uhlans, and then you've got the Germans who were stuck there after the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, who joined in. Freikorps, Landswehr, more Freikorps, and you've got the British Dominion. So you've got Australians, Indian cavalry, Indian infantry, British Empire infantry. French troops, the Chasseurs d'Afrique, the French colonials, the French metropolitan, and you got these Macnavists. I think they were anarchists. I'm not sure. I don't know who the Macnavists were. So you could build up another Russian faction. Then you got Japanese infantry, cavalry, and here are the Turks, Turkish infantry and cavalry, and more Estonians, Americans, USA infantry, Finnish Jaegers. Greek infantry, and that is just what I printed off. If you go to their website, they've got far more than that, and they've got rules they've got a campaign system. I can't remember what it's called. It's called something like Beyond the Don, but there's a whole supplement allowing you to play campaigns. So I highly recommend it. I mean, it's all they ask you if you're kind enough to donate money to charity when you go to their website, and you know. It all goes to a good cause, but this is far more comprehensive than any other Russian Civil War set of rules that I know of. So there we go. Anyway, that's it. That's the end of my promotion, and look forward to seeing you on the next video. Bye for now.